Okay, everyone, good evening. And yeah, welcome to the Pensions Committee and Board. Please advise that this meeting is recorded by the Council for live and subsequent broadcast via the Council's intranet site. I'm just going to do some quick introductions just to start. So my name is Armin Mahboob. I'll be the chair for this evening. Tim?
Yeah, my name is Tim Mpofu, Head of Pensions and Treasury.
Jamie Abbott, Pension Manager.
Patrick Hughes, Legal Advisor to the Committee. John Bevan, Northumberland Park, Vice Chair.
Councillor Cathy Brennan, Muswell Hill.
Hi, I'm Councillor Tammy Hymas and I represent St Anne's Ward.
Hi, I'm Matt White, Councillor for Tottenham Central.
Alex Goddard, Investment Consultant from Mercer.
I'm Julie Bailey, a Fund Actuary from Hymans Robertson.
Douglas Green, another Fund Actuary from Hymans Robertson.
Ismail O'Warish, Employee Member.
Sean Risen, Independent Advisor.
Randy Plowhead from Southside.
And I'm Nazir Chowdhury, Principal Committee Coordinator and Clerk for this evening's meeting.
And we've received apologies from Keith Brown, Craig Patterson, and Councillor Inkaran. And there are no items of urgent business currently, if that's correct. Just going on to declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest or any conflicts to declare? No? Okay, cool. We'll carry that on. Item 5, there's no deputations. Item 6, do any members have any training to report? Councillor Bevan?
I've emailed mine in tonight to the officer.
Is there any other training to report?
Yes, Chair, just to confirm that members of the Pensions Committee and Board did receive training on cash flow forecasting just before this meeting.
Thank you, Tim. And is there anything else that anyone wants to talk about? No. Okay, then we'll continue. Moving on to item 7, which is the minutes. Sorry, Tim, did you want to say anything? Okay, we'll go through the minutes. Do we have any comments for the minutes that have taken for the meeting that took place on the 21st of March 2023? Councillor Bevan.
I might have missed it, or it might have been another meeting. Did we not discuss the Pension and Lifetime Saving Association? Because I've scanned these quickly because I've only just got these minutes, so I might have missed it, but it might have been another meeting, but it's in my head.
Tim?
Yes, we did discuss that at the informal working group meeting, and there are some follow-up actions which I have inquired and will be writing to members in due course.
Is there any other comments on the minutes? Councillor Hymas?
Can I just check, was the written response provided to the deputation at the last meeting?
Tim?
No, so just to confirm, the written response has not been written back for the deputation. The reason for that is there is currently a petition that's open that ends in September, and the intention is to write that to provide the members of Friends of the Earth and Unison with that response after that petition has closed.
Do you have a follow-up, sorry, Councillor Hymas, or no?
What will materially change once the petition period has closed?
Perhaps it's not to influence the current petition that's open, whatever the response the committee provides. So that's something obviously I will share in consultation with the chair, and then a written response will be provided to them. If you recall, their deputation did ask for specific actions from the Pensions Committee, and they require some considered response before that petition is closed, because the petition covers some of the same issues as well.
Okay, is there any other comments on the minutes? Tim?
Yes, if there's no other comments, I just wanted to make a point of clarification on one of the items in the minutes. I believe it's on page 7, which is in regards to the external audit progress report that was delivered at the last meeting. Members may recall on the second from last paragraph that the independent advisor and the legal advisor sort of offered two pieces of advice, which on the face of the minutes may seem like they're contradictory, with response to whether we needed to inform the pensions regulator of the delay. So following discussions that were held separately outside of this meeting, we just want to clarify for the meetings that both things can be true. The pensions regulator is responsible mainly for the administration when it comes to the LGPS, not necessarily for the investments or accounting. However, given that the auditor, when they look at the accounts, they review the entire process of the pension fund, which includes the controls, we will be undertaking an assessment as to whether we need to self-report to the pensions regulator and then provide an update to the committee at the September meeting. So that's just to provide further clarification, just so it's clear and noted for the meeting.
Okay, thank you. And if that's all, then we'll carry on to item 8. So pensions administration update. Can I now get you to introduce that, Tim? Sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Have we actually agreed the minutes? Sorry, I missed.
Oh, can we agree the minutes?
Agreed.
Agreed? Okay. Yeah, carrying on to item 8, and just to remind everyone that is to note this report and also to note and approve the admissions listed in 6.14.
Thank you. So, going to go through the pensions administration update, and in this update, we're going to cover the pension fund membership, the online member self-service portal, update on the pension dashboard program and what we're doing as a fund for that, and as mentioned previously, approval of the new emission agreements. So starting off with the membership update, as you can see, there's been a slight increase in the active and pensioner members, and quite a large increase in the deferred members. This is down to quite a lot of data cleanse work the team been doing around finalising member records who've left previously. So that's been quite a big uptake. We don't expect that to jump up again next quarter. On to the member self-service. So a bit of background, the member self-service portal is where members can log on, view their pensions online, they can update their address details and stuff like that. As you can see, again, a slight increase in the numbers. We are looking to kind of do a bit of project work around that to kind of keep boosting those numbers up and try to kind of guide members onto the member self-service portal to kind of take away queries from the admin team. And below that as well is kind of like a breakdown of kind of how many members are accessing the member self-service portal over the last 7 days, 30 days, 2 months and 3 months. So on to the pension dashboard. So what is pension dashboard? Basically, it's going to be an online portal where members can log on, input their details, and it will pull back all information about their pensions they hold across all pension schemes, including the state pension. So how it will work is a member will input their information onto the pension dashboard website, and that's referred to as the find data. That will be sent across to the pension funds across the UK, and then it's matched against the information we hold on our pension system. And then if we get a match, then we'll ping back the members' pension information to them to be viewed online. If there isn't a match or partial match, we'll send back a partial match. You may have benefits here, and we'll prompt the member to get in touch with the pension scheme to find out. If there's no match, then nothing is sent back. So in regard to this, on the 8th of June, the Department of Work and Pensions issues a ministerial statement, provide an update on the connection deadline. So the connection deadline is the dates that the pension funds have to connect to the pension dashboard. And that's been pushed back to the 31st of October 2026. Now, even though the connection deadline has been pushed back, the actual kind of staging date will be different and earlier. So we're waiting for guidance on that. Even though it's guidance, they do expect funds to adhere to the staging date. I had like a really good analogy, like if everyone turned up to a restaurant at 8 p.m. for dinner, it wouldn't work. So we need to kind of stagger out the approach. So they're going to break it down by scheme size and scheme types, I believe. So once we kind of get that staging date, we'll update the pension board committee on that. Again, the staging date is different to the dashboard's available point. So the staging date is when pension funds have to connect. The dashboard available point is the point at which dashboard will be turned on for members to access. The issue between the two dates is that if the pension dashboards go live and we're not connected to dashboards, members who go on to look for their details who know they have service at Haringey won't get a response back from the pension dashboard, and that may increase queries to the team chasing pension information. So even though, that's the deadline being pushed to October 2026, schemes have been reminded that despite the delay, they should still be doing work for dashboards, and a lot of that is around data cleansing, so ensuring that the data we hold is accurate and up to date, because again, if we hold old information, a member could go online, input the details onto dashboards, and get a partial match when it should be a full match, and that generates more work for the admin team. Yeah, so moving on to, good point. Any questions on dashboards or what we're doing as fun for that? Cool. If there are no questions, I'll move on to item 6.12, approval of new emission agreements. So background on emission agreements is basically an agreement between the LGPS, the Haringey Pension Fund, and a new service provider. So when a service which was previously provided by the council or an employee within a fund is being taken over, they have to take on the LGPS members as well. So we have this emission agreement in place to guarantee the members' benefits. So we have quite a few emission agreements to agree across 4 emission bodies. So we have Clean Tech Services taking over the contract for Stroud Green Primary, Birkin Cleaning Services taking over Hornsey Schools for Girls, Olive Dining are taking over catering services for St Mary's Priory Catholic Infant and Junior School, Tetherdown Primary School, Devonshire Hill Nursery and Primary School, and then Aspen Services are taking over catering services for Academies Enterprise Trust, which is Trinity Primary. So I think there's 7 emission agreements in total. So just bear in mind the Olive Dining one, for those 3 schools, are 3 separate emission agreements. It's not all tied into one. So we'd like to invite members to approve those.
Is there any, Councillor White?
Thanks. So I have a question on the wording of the recommendation on this section. As previously, when new employers have been admitted, the recommendation here has been to approve the admission of new bodies, but here it's to note and approve. And what exactly are we noting? Because it's am I right in thinking that it's this body that makes the decision to approve? I'm just wondering why the wording of whether there's any change that's reflected in the change of the wording of the recommendation. Sorry if that's a bit nerdy.
Tim, would you like to answer?
Yeah, happy to take that one. So to answer your question, there isn't anything more substantive. I think the noting is just in reference to the table. Ordinarily, there's usually 1 or 2 admission agreements we send to you, so we'll just list approve this body. But given that there is a variety of companies here and they're all offering different services, the noting is to say that they're all different and doing something different, but the request is still for the committee to approve whether we can admit them into the Haringey LGPS scheme.
Are there any other questions regarding this? Councillor Bevan?
Is there any progress on the apprenticeship for the pension staffing? Because I know we've talked about this for quite a few years. There was an aim to get 1 or 2 apprenticeships into the team because pension skills are becoming really scarce in the UK.
Jamie?
Thank you. Yeah, fully agree. So we've just finished recruitment into the team. So we advertised for a pension officer role, which we've just offered and been accepted for that member of staff. So now we've got a fully staffed pension section, which is kind of what we aimed for in the past year. So that's good. And now that's kind of been done, we are looking to explore the apprentice as well. So that should be soon, hopefully, but we'll keep the pension committee updated on progress to that.
Yeah, and I'll just echo your comments on it is quite difficult to get pension expertise into the team. So I think we're quite happy that we've been able to resource. I think you remember this time last year, we were talking about how much we had to recruit before we get an apprentice. So we've now completed that phase of the recruitment. And before the end of the year, we'll be speaking with our HR teams to make sure that we can get an apprentice into the team.
Are there any other comments or questions regarding this? No? Can I move to see if there's approval for the admissions listed in 6.14? Yeah, I see your head shaking, so I'm guessing it's approved. Okay, approved. Going on to item 9 now. Item 9. I see that there is an exempt section that relates to this, so I'll get you to present it, Tim, but we'll continue our discussion in the exempt section of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so you're right to point out that there are a couple exempt appendices. So when I get to their section in the report, I'll just highlight those, and I'll just ask members not to ask any questions in this part of the meeting, but feel free to discuss that in detail when we go into the exempt part of the meeting. So this update is the Pension Fund Quarterly Investment and Performance Update. It covers a range of areas which are listed in item 1.1, which range from the investment in independent advisors market commentary to investment performance, asset allocation, and also the funding position update. So this report is as at the 31st of March, 2023. So the first thing to bring to members' attention is really on section 6.2 of the report, which looks at the investment performance over the last quarter or over various time periods. The main thing to bring to members' attention is, again, the size of the fund at the moment, which is about 1.7 billion, and that over that quarter, of the last quarter, there was actually a positive return of 2.35%, although this underperformed its benchmark, which can happen from time to time. In the chart in section 6.3, it looks at the different time periods. As you can see, the last quarter was quite positive, but when we look at the performance of the fund over the year, it's been rather negative, and perhaps we can have a bit more of a discussion about that in the exempt part of the meeting. In section 6.4, we just explain some of the reasons around the performance of the fund over the quarter, particularly to do with the positive returns from listed equities and credit strategies. There was a lot of volatility during that period, but I think markets generally expected that inflation estimates would recover, and there was going to be there was going to be a recession coming soon, so we'd expect the central banks to start reducing their rates. Of course, in the UK, there seems to be a different impact on inflation. It seems to be staying higher for longer, which poses a different threat. But when you look at the United States, yesterday, the US CPI was reported at 3%. So they seem to be driving inflation down, which is buoyant, is a good reason for markets to sort of have positive outperformance. An area of particular concern that members might want to pay attention to is the commercial property sector. Again, that's seemingly to be underperforming due to some downward asset revisions. But again, that's a good source of income and stability, and we can discuss that in more detail in the exam session. Going on to section 6.7, which is titled Investment Asset Allocation. Members will note that we've changed this section slightly. There used to be a table, now there is a chart, which again is an illustration of how the asset allocation has evolved over time. As you will see, over the last 4 quarters, there hasn't been any dramatic changes, which is consistent with the asset allocation decisions that the committee has made. In section 6.8, we show the listed or the liquid assets that are in the fund. The purpose for this is already incorporated in our investment strategy statement, and it sets some allowable ranges where if assets were to outperform, there is a delegation in place for us to be able to rebalance the portfolio on behalf of the fund. And again, this is just to point out that during the quarter, and as at this point, there isn't any significant variance that requires any reallocation. In section 6.12, it just references our an update regarding the London SIV and our asset allocation. Again, it's stayed relatively consistent at about 75%. There are 20% of funds invested directly with London SIV, And we know there are certain funds like the Renewable Infrastructure and the London Fund that's still in their funding phase. So over time, we'd expect that to increase slightly. So I'll pause on that. Those are sort of the specific investments. And if there are any questions based on what I've sort of highlighted, I'll be happy to take those. Otherwise, I can move forward to the funding position update.
Councillor Bevan.
Just a comment. I think the London Civ would be pleased to come and talk to the committee on their future funds that they're setting up and generally about the pool and us. This is the impression that I'm getting, and I think for some members it would be quite informative. So whether that can be fitted in with a future agenda, if you think it's worthwhile, Chair.
Yeah, I echo that point. I got to meet the person from CIV, and I think for a future investment and governance working group, it could be a great thing to do. Councillor Hymas.
Could you just explain the differences in practice between having the funds directly managed by the pooling company and just having them with the pool? Like, could you explain how like the differences in practice between funds that are directly managed by the pooling company and those funds which are only with the pool?
So I think the difference is there is an arrangement with one of the with the two big asset managers in the UK that do a lot of the passive funds. So the passive, I think, as we've discussed before, listed sort of vehicles that track an index, and essentially those funds are not directly managed by the London Civ, they're managed by this asset management, but there is an arrangement in place where it considers them as pooled. The London Civ, since its inception, has set up a number of different funds, which were invested in directly, something like the London Civ Multi-Asset Credit, the London Civ Absolute Return Fund, the Renewable Infrastructure Fund, and also the London Fund. These are investments that they have set up themselves. They've appointed the managers, and they regularly monitor those and manage and report their performance. The other passive managed assets, although they're considered to be pooled assets, they're not directly under their oversight. They don't actually manage or make any decisions on those portfolios. They just have an agreement in place that reduces fees for member funds.
If there are no other questions, I'll carry on now to item 10. I'll get you to present it, Tim, and I guess we're passing it to John afterwards.
So just before we go to item 10, just an update on the funding level, because it is in the main part. It's just to note to members that the funding position has improved. But again, we've got actuaries today, and they'll be discussing that in further detail in the exempt part. But it's just to note for the minutes that it's improved from 113% to 132%.
Sure, thank you, Tim. And yeah, if you wanted to start on item 10. Unless, do you have a question, Councillor White? Hold on. We're going to look at the recommendations with the exempt minutes, exempt item, yeah. So item 10.
Right, happy to introduce item 10. So item 10 is the independent advisors report on the LGPS update. So you might have noted, if you've been following the news, that there's been quite a number of updates happening in the LGPS, and the independent advisor has written a report to summarize this, but also to provide a discussion point for members about some of the developments that we can expect in the scheme. So in section 1.1, I've sort of listed all of them out, which are the main ones, and we also had a few that have progressed, a few more since we actually wrote the report, and we'll be discussing those. So in the first instance, if Chair, if it's okay, I would like to invite John Raisin to sort of talk us through his report, and then we can take the item from there.
Sure, go for it, John.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tim. This essentially updates you on 6 major areas. There's some background information in there for newer members, but I think everyone here, almost everyone here, will know that background information. So I won't cover the background information. We'll just cover the pertinent issues. Changes to pensions taxation. Pensions taxation basically relates to the lifetime and annual allowances. These were amounts you could save in pensions annually and over a lifetime. The annual allowance was set at £40,000. The technicalities about how that's reached, but that's the amount. In the budget, Jeremy Hunt increased that to 60,000. He also, I think more significantly, amended the lifetime allowance, which was 1.073 million at the time. That was abolished. Most local government pension scheme members never came within either the annual or lifetime allowance. However, over time, increasing numbers of senior managers have, and also some long-serving middle managers. The effect on the annual allowance, I think, would be to take out most people, probably apart from the most senior, a handful of people in each local authority. And as for the lifetime allowance, well, everyone is out of it at the moment. Whether that might change going forward is another matter. So it is a significant change for the moment. How long it lasts is anyone's guess. Consultation on McLeod, as we know, age discrimination exists in the LGPS because essentially the government put in place a defective scheme in 2014 and 15 across the public sector. Since the last update, which I think was almost a year ago, the last LGPS update came to you, they've come back on a 2020 consultation, which was a big consultation about how they were going to tackle the technicalities of this. They've come back with responses, and they've issued a further consultation to look at issues which weren't covered in that initial consultation, and also some issues which, when they came back on the first consultation, they said, we want to talk to you about again. So they've issued a second consultation, which closed on the 30th of June. They then intend, they've also issued draft regulations, and they intend this all to come into place from the 1st of October 2023, be backdated, of course, back to 14 when the defective regulations were introduced. The big issue, of course, is there'll be lots of work for Jamie's section to do, but in reality, almost everyone will not be affected because most people will be better off under the new scheme than they would have been under the old scheme had it continued. So what's going to happen is that every single person who is eligible from 14 onwards has to be assessed, but in most cases there'll be a negative impact. Sorry, not a negative impact, a nil impact, because they were better off under the new scheme than they would have been under the old scheme. If you recall, this came out of the judges' scheme originally, and I suspect it might not be the same in the judges' scheme, but I'm not an expert in that. We move on. Climate change reporting. You remember that at long last, last year, there was a consultation issued on 1st of September 2022 that closed on 24th of November, and we expected new regulations to come in place from 1st of April 2023, with the first reports being required by December 2024. Closed in November, we didn't hear anything. It got to April. Scheme Advisory Board still suggested that it would come in 2023, but it would be retrospective. Then the Scheme Advisory Board said, we don't think it will happen this year. And then finally, a letter was issued by Lee Rowley, who's the Minister, on the 15th of June, confirming it will be delayed for at least another year. So climate change reporting won't come in until 2024 at the earliest, and the first report won't be recorded until 2025. If you remember, for defined benefit schemes in the private sector, this came in October 2022 for all schemes, and those over 5 billion from 2021. So, effectively what the government has done, I think they've missed a big opportunity here to push climate change reporting forward and the change to a carbon-free world, because there is no compulsory requirement at this time, and some funds are reporting, which is in different formats. Hopefully they'll put something in place fairly soon. Investment pooling. I won't go through what's here because there was a consultation finally issued on the 11th of July, the day after Jeremy Hunt made his Mansion House speech. I'm not going to go into the detail of that tonight, only to say it is quite a complicated consultation. You may see some stuff in the press saying it's not very complicated. I think that myself, Tim, and certainly I've spoken with Hymans, and none of us think it is simple. I'm not going to comment on it tonight. We will be coming back to you at the next committee with a lot more commentary and thought, and a consultation reply, which of course Tim will lead on writing, but he'll involve other advisors in that. The Economic Activity of Public Bodies Overseas Matters Bill. The government have introduced something called the Economic Activity of Public Bodies Overseas Matters Bill, and a letter was issued by the relevant secretaries or Undersecretary of State. In this, she clarifies this bill is only concerned with disinvestment targeted at foreign countries or territories, and and it doesn't deal with fossil fuel boycotts or disinvestments. And she says it doesn't affect fiduciary duty. I would agree with her that it doesn't affect fiduciary duty because it only talks about countries, it doesn't talk about companies. And of course, you would be at liberty to disregard a company if you thought it was either not financially advantageous or that you wanted to exclude it on ESG basis, as long as it wasn't financially significant and you'd gone through a due process. It is interesting that the Scheme Advisory Board commented on the 23rd of June, and I quote, "As far as the board is aware, there is no evidence that any LGPS fund has instituted inappropriate, politically motivated boycott or disinvestment policies." What I think they mean by that is that, as far as I know, no LGPS fund has ever boycotted a country. So I think what we can say here is, why are they introducing this for the LGPS? It doesn't seem relevant, because all funds have always gone by fiduciary duty, and fiduciary duty does not preclude you excluding individual companies. If you have the power to do that, of course, because sometimes you don't, because your investment managers make those decisions. Final bit is pensions regulator. There is supposed to be a new general code coming out, which would replace Code 14, which Jamie is subject to. That's been somewhat delayed. We've been expecting it basically since 2021 when they first consulted. It's supposed to be out this year. We'll wait and see whether it is. That's just my comments. Happy to answer members' questions.
Councillor White.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, John. Just on the pooling section, this is a kind of fairly broad question, but I thought I'd ask you. Obviously, pooling is something that the government says they want all LGPS funds to do. It seems to me that this is intended as a way of dealing with the fact that individual funds themselves are fairly small in the global pensions landscape, and funds in London are particularly small compared to other funds in the UK. I think I'm right in saying that. So, do you think that LGPS funds in the UK, and particularly in London, are really too small, and actually there needs to be a kind of reorganisation?
In short, no. And I'll defend funds, and it's quite easy to do it. Let's look at the funding level and success of the LGPS since I think it was formed in 1922. What's the present funding level across the LGPS? Average, 106%. What was it, the last valuation? 96%. You know, the LGPS is a highly funded scheme. This wasn't achieved via using pooling. This was achieved because individual LGPS funds, committees, you know, advised by advisors, made sensible asset allocations, strategic asset allocations over many, many, many years, and appointed appropriate asset managers to implement those, although of course implementation is very secondary, as you know, it's strategic asset allocation. So actually, if you want to talk about the big picture, in my view, no, you're not too small. You don't actually need pooling. Now, look, there can be advantages to pooling if it works, in terms of scale, in terms of access to other investment classes, or I'd argue, personally, that you could get those. You know, I'm thinking of funds like Waltham Forest, like Haringey, who were investing in infrastructure long ago. If other smaller London boroughs weren't so forward-thinking as you were, or Waltham Forest was, well, that's the matter for them. So I think the answer is that a forward-looking, well-managed fund, which I believe Haringey has been for many years, and certainly it was when I arrived in 2012, and it has been increasingly so, I think, since. I don't see there's a reason for pooling. However, it's here. It's going to stay, and we can hopefully use it to our advantage. But I think the important thing about this consultation is pools have to work on behalf of funds, because there is a danger with pooling. And that is that some of us, talking about myself now, believe that pension funds are best ultimately run by you, the elected members. Yeah, because that brings some accountability and some control for the members ultimately, I believe. The danger with pooling, of course, is that they remove yourselves. They remove Randy, they remove Ishmael. And they put in place, you know, professional Neds and various worthies, be blunt about it. That's the danger of it. So I think pooling will happen. It is going to go forward. The government is determined to push it forward. I don't hear, you know, that anyone else is going to change that politically. So I think we have to make it work for ourselves. So I think the important thing about this consultation, which I don't want to talk about length because it's too complex, is funds have to go back to make sure that pools work for them, not for themselves. Because as this consultation points out, there's been a lot of different practices across pools and there's a lot of issues. Some have been successful. I think some have genuinely worked very well on behalf of their constituent funds, but not all 8 have. I don't think, and I think if if we spoke, privately, we could talk about who they were and what. So I think it's different. But pooling's here to stay. But do I think that Haringey needs to be abolished? Do I think the 32 London boroughs need to be abolished? In short, no. That represents local democracy. If you start abolishing and amalgamating, you'll end up with elected members pushed out, I believe, and you'll end up with, in inverted commas, the worthies, whoever they may be, people who are not at all involved in local government, potentially in. That's a scenario no one's talking about. But if you think about it, the way that some of these pools have moved, with the people they've appointed onto their boards of directors, there's not a lot of LGPS representation from you, or from the officers, or from here, or here, or here. That's just a view. Whether other people agree with it, I don't know. But you've asked me a straight question, Councillor, and I'll give you an answer.
Councillor Hammers.
Yeah, I wanted to note your comments on the Economic Activity Bill. So as I understand, part of the reason for its implementation was Lancashire City Council, or Lancashire City Council, who passed a motion calling on their county council to divest from investments in the occupied territories. I'm just wondering, is that not an example, in your view, of a that seems to me what the government is targeting. But do you think how does that, do you think, interact with the bill? Do you think that would outlaw that kind of motion being put through a pensions committee?
Well, I don't know what the government's motivation is, quite honestly. But I don't personally, from looking at a sort of pensions investment and governance point of view, I don't see what this bill has to do with the LGPS, because you have fiduciary duty. You can already exclude companies on the basis that either they're not financially sound, or you could exclude a company on the basis of ESG if it doesn't play a significant part in the overall investment of the fund. You wouldn't, cause a severe detriment. So what is this all about in terms of pension funds? Now, the government may, and I don't want to get into a political issue here, but the government may have a thought, whatever, that they don't want local authorities to be making, views about foreign policy. But that could be where they're coming from. Whether that's in their view or not, I don't know. But I don't see it personally how that relates to local government pension schemes, because as the Scheme Advisory Board says, no one has ever put in a blanket boycott. But there is nothing in any case to stop you saying, I don't want to invest in X company, if you could control a direct investment, and often you can't, remember, because you delegated to investment managers. So it's just a little bit, to my mind, I just don't see why they're making a big thing of it with LGPS, because it's never really affected us, that sort of thing.
Councillor Hammers.
Yeah, so you're basically saying that if you had investments in, certain countries, that you could withdraw those investments and invest them elsewhere if you didn't come and say, we're doing it for this reason because we don't want to invest in this country. You could say, well, we've looked at those companies and they have ESG concerns with them, but it's actually not related to a kind of blanket policy of a committee around divestment.
I think, if you only decided not to invest in certain companies and it was all in one country or one territory, it might be a bit obvious. But what I'm saying to you is that there is nothing at this point to stop a fund saying they didn't want to invest in a particular company. For example, I don't think anyone could fault a company, and I'll stand to be corrected by anyone else here, those advisors. If a fund will say, well, we don't want to invest in BP, because we don't like BP's approach to ESG. So we're not going to invest in that. And we're going to ask our asset managers to create a separate fund without BP investment. BP is a big company, but I know of a fund that did that, yeah? Nobody came and said you can't do that, because BP, in a whole scheme of even the FTSE 100, but when you come to talk about the whole of world equities, BP is nothing, even though it's a hugely important company. So that fund that said we don't want to deal with BP, they weren't going to get faulted because it wasn't financially significant. Well, they could argue, firstly, we don't think that there's a financial problem here. We think that they're going to have stranded assets going to other things. But even if you accept their argument, we're going to transition, people might say, well, on ESG grounds anyway, we don't like them, there's other things about them, we're not going to invest in them. So that wouldn't be a problem. So there isn't a problem in saying we don't invest in a single company, I think, and so therefore you couldn't be forced. So if you were to not invest in certain companies because you didn't like them on either financial grounds, because you don't believe they're financially sound in the long term, or you've got ESG concerns and that ESG concern isn't of significant financial impact, that's what the guidance says, as long as it's not significantly financially impacted, you can withdraw from a company or say we're not going to invest in that company. So in a sense, it doesn't affect your fiduciary duty because no one, as far as I know, has ever said anywhere, people have discussed boycotts, etc., in various places, but no one's ever said we're going to do that. So, I just wonder. But what I'm saying is it's legitimate not to invest in an individual company on ESG grounds or on financial grounds. I stand to be corrected by anyone else here.
Yeah, Councillor Hymas.
Just a final point on this then. So there's a petition that is currently active, which is asking the committee to commit not to investing in occupied territories in Israel in this particular example, I think, from a group called Justice for Palestine. Once the bill was introduced and became an act, I guess my question is, would it be illegal for us to accept that petition and say, yes, we'll do what those petitioners want?
At the moment, obviously, it's just a bill. So we need to wait and see what it comes out at the end. But yes, it will be. And I mean, the bill as it is at the moment doesn't only deals with pension, but also procurement. So it's quite wide. And there will be implications, for example, for the pension fund, they are going to extend the powers of the pension regulator to impose the ban, and also to impose a fine. But obviously, like I say, we need to wait for the final legislation to come through.
Councillor White wanted to go next.
Thanks. So, I mean, effectively, all I'm doing is summing up what I understand of the discussion, which to me it sounds like if we were to pass a resolution here that we are no longer going to invest in anything related to country X because we don't want to, that would fall foul of the Act. But if what we're doing is we're saying we don't want to invest with this particular company because we don't like. We think that its activities are having a negative social effect in a particular area of its operations, then that sounds like that would be okay. So I guess that seems to me like what's being said.
Yeah, but what I did say, I think we need to be very careful because I think, and obviously Patrick's a solicitor and I'm not, but if the Act was passed, there is always that danger that if people were seen to be trying to subvert the way around the Act, then somebody could challenge it. So, for example, if a fund said, we are not going to invest in these 15 companies, they all happen to operate, let's just say, no, let's not say 15, we're going to not invest in any company that invests in the United States, just as an example. I'm being, here. So I personally don't like the death penalty. Yeah, I think it's wrong. I can persuade all of you not to invest in the United States. You then say, we're not going to invest in the United States. I think you'd be caught out on it. But if you decided not to invest in certain American companies, because you had issues that you didn't think they were financially a sound investment, or some limited number of mega companies because you had concerns about them on ESG grounds, then that would be, I think, fine. But if you were, you've got to make sure that you're not caught out, all of the companies that you went against, you could say, well, they're all in this particular area, they're all in, I don't know, country X. That, I think, it would be very dangerous. Patrick may correct me here, but so I think if any fund was going to do exclusions, they would have to think very carefully to make sure it was strictly on investment grounds or ESG grounds, and not ESG grounds which could be said to be politically motivated. I think that's probably a summation. Patrick can say whether he thinks that's right or wrong.
Yes, I think what will happen is that any investment strategy would have to be looked at when the Act comes into force to see whether it falls foul of it. It's very difficult to say at the moment, because obviously we don't know what the final piece of legislation would be. But that would be the prudent thing to do.
Tim, and then we'll go to Councillor Hymas.
Yeah, I think I'll just come in on a relatively quick point. I think the intention, as was stated in the letter, is that funds do not boycott against foreign countries and not companies. But I think to reiterate the point that John made is if you were to divest from certain companies that are operating in a country and that's specific, there could be a challenge to the committee on whether you've done that purely on ESG rules or trying to subvert the law. Now, from what Patrick is saying, the law will have implications in terms of funds that do that, what happens to them, and there could be legal penalties. So the advice, I think, from Patrick is saying is that we have to wait until the law is out and it's been published, and we'll provide further updates to members on that. But just to raise the flag that the intention is to stop what sort of Councillor Hyman's referred to in the first instance. So anything that tries to subvert that would result in challenge or potential challenge to the committee, and the committee would have to think carefully about making those type of decisions.
Councillor Hymas.
Yeah, I wonder if I can make a suggestion. I mean, personally, I think this is a kind of restriction on our democratic rights as elected councillors to respond to, demands being made by, our members, as well as infringing our ability to make decisions over fiduciary duty to a certain extent, because we may decide that companies that choose to invest in certain countries are not a wise investment on that basis. So I'm wondering if the chair would consider writing to the minister to express our concerns amongst the pension committee and board, and whether that would be supported by the membership.
So that's a political decision that we'll probably have to consult the leader of the council with as well. But I'm open to this. I'll take Councillor Bevan.
The local authority pension fund forum has taken up this issue, and it is writing and consulting with the minister on this very issue on behalf of all councils, because I was at one of the events this week and this issue was discussed.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions in regards to this report?
Sorry, just also say the Scheme Advisory Board is looking at this on Monday at its meeting as well. That's the body that kind of looks after all the LGPS funds in England and Wales. That's on their agenda for the 17th of July, I believe.
Sure. Is there any other questions? Oh, I firstly have an ask and then a question, but John, I believe it's currently just past the second stage of the House of Commons, the second reading. So if you could just update us in the next meeting. It'll be in September. I know they have their summer recess, so I don't know if it'll progress to the Lords, but it'll be good to know where that gets to. My second question, I guess, goes to the McLeod kind of item. It seems like a lot of work in a very short period of time, and I just wanted reassurance, or if you guys need our help, whether we have the resources to kind of get that in on time.
Yeah, I think we previously discussed at the committee meeting about that. So at the moment, it's very much kind of data driven. So we're ensuring that we have the hours and kind of pay for the members on record, and then once we have that and we're happy with that, we will then have to then run through the McLeod calculation on Altair, and that will kind of flag up any members who we feel we have to rectify, and that's when we have a better understanding of the resources needed. At this time, we're not kind of wholly sure until we run that through the system, but once we do that and have a better understanding, we'll report back to the committee on that.
Sure, thank you. If there's no other questions, I will move to the next item. So that's item 11. Yeah, presented. If you could present that, Tim, as well.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bevan, for the nice lead into LAP. So this is the LAP update report, which we produce for this committee on a regular basis. This is essentially just to update you on the activities of LAP, but also the voting recommendations that they've issued during the quarter, and also how the asset managers, which is particularly Legal and General, how they've also voted in line with that recommendation. So in section 6.2, the key thing to highlight is LAP engaged with 395 companies in over 20 countries. Majority of this engagement consisted of them sending letters to the companies that make up the FTSE All-Share Index, and essentially they're requesting that these companies create a climate transition plan and that it be presented to shareholders for approval. LAP do tend to do this exercise on an annual basis, and there has been some progress made as we've seen a number of companies actually create climate transition plans, which they brought forward. Of course, when they present those to shareholders, LAP can issue a recommendation voting against if they don't feel that that report goes far enough. So again, we'll be keeping you updated on how that level of engagement improves this time around, and if there are any other companies that come forward with new climate transition plans. In terms of voting alert, there was just one voting alert against Rio Tinto. They had their annual shareholder meeting in the first quarter, or in this reporting quarter of the year. I think this was mainly based on their holdings in the Australian index, or on the Australian market, and essentially it was a recommendation to vote against their annual report. So you note that the report was voted through successfully. I think this was more of a protest vote from LAP, as they expressed that they were not happy with the lack of information towards how the climate transition plans. So again, this is just to bring that issue to the forefront, to make sure that Rio Tinto, which is a big miner, is actually taking climate transition seriously as well. So those are the key things to just update. But as I will say to members, if you're not already signed up on the mailing list, LAP do send out quite a lot of information about their activities, and they also invite members to events to get a better understanding of the work that they're doing.
Is there any questions regarding that? No. Okay, then we'll move on to item 12. I think, Tim, you're presenting this again. This is the risk register.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the risk register that we bring to the Pensions Committee and Board on a quarterly basis. Each meeting, we take a focus of a different area of the risk register. It's quite a comprehensive risk register. I think we cover about 4 or 5 different areas. So this particular meeting will focus on the governance risk, which we've attached to this report as Appendix 1 to this paper. Just to remind members again on our risk scoring, the idea of this is once we've assessed the risk as officers, we invite members to also comment on our assessment of those risks and some of the actions that we've noted down, and if anything further needs to be done, we sort of take that advice from you as members. So in terms of the scoring itself, we assign a score of 1 to 5. 1 meaning that it's low and unlikely, which is usually a good thing, and 5 meaning that it's got a high impact and very likely to occur, which is not a good thing. So what we've identified in section 6.5 are some of the key risks that score in that red RAG rating, which the key risks that needs to be monitored on a regular basis. So members will be familiar with some of these risks. They have been there for some time, but we've just updated them since the last meeting. So the key thing to note is high inflation, particularly in the UK. It stays elevated at 8.7%. Again, that has an impact on our funding on the liability side for the pension fund, but also has some impact on the investment performance going forward, which we'll continue to monitor as part of our strategic asset allocation review. Then there is the ongoing delay with the publication of the statement of accounts, particularly the outstanding audits. Again, there isn't much to update on this point. The external auditor did present to the committee at the last meeting, but relatively little progress has been made since then. But hopefully we'll be able to invite them again at the September meeting for a further update, where we'll also be presenting the annual report of the year. The final risk is on the increasing risk of a market downturn, which I think previously might have been amber, but we've increased that back to red. We saw that as inflation has continued to stay high, the Bank of England has continued to increase interest rates, and the bank rate is now at 5%, with some market forecasts predicting that we might reach as high as 6.25 before the end of the year. So again, this is to just highlight to members that this is a key risk. It will have an impact on our investment portfolio, and we need to be quite focused in terms of what those impacts are. And today, of course, our advisors, who, as part of the exam sessions, you can feel free to ask them any questions about the implications of that increasing risk. In terms of the governance itself, there isn't really anything to highlight on the governance risk register, but again, I would invite comments from members on anything that they might have noted or anything that we might have overlooked that requires further attention from us.
Is there any comments on the risk register, particularly on the governance side? No. I think oh, sorry, Councillor Hymas.
Have you, there was some talk of appointing apprentices. Has that happened?
No, I think Jamie covered that earlier. It's not happened yet, but we're hoping to happen soon. Essentially, what we're trying to do is make sure that we recruit into the rest of the team first, which we've just completed, and then the next phase is to get the apprentice in. But we are getting a graduate trainee who will be joining us in September, which will also be good, working more on the investment side. So we're quite excited about that.
Is there any other comments? If not, I know I spoke to you briefly about it, Jamie, about Gov4, but it'd be good for the committee to know, go a bit more in depth into the engagement we're doing with, different companies. So yeah.
I've got possibly a very innocent question, but you're talking about keeping up with inflation the whole time. Is it not a case that aren't we always sort of like playing catch up? Or do you actually keep up with inflation when inflation's rampant, and do the profits of the whole sort of fund actually keep up with that, or how does that work?
We'll take Councillor Brennan's question first, then mine. Mercer, I think would do that. Yeah.
So I think it's important to distinguish between short time periods and much longer time periods, because certainly if you look at the headlines about inflation being 10% over the past year, if you look at the performance figures for the fund, we've quite clearly, significantly underperformed, because it's been quite a challenging environment for equity markets and other asset classes. But if you go back over much longer time periods where inflation has averaged much closer to the 2% target, then the investment strategy that we have in place has an expected return that's quite significantly higher than that, and has delivered returns that are significantly higher than that as well. So certainly the fund has outperformed inflation over longer time periods.
Thank you. And Jamie, if you could just provide some updates on Gov4.
Yes, so a big challenge of the fund is to kind of engage with the employers and employees and kind of keep them up to date with what's happening in the pension fund and their own benefits. So for employers, we are communicating with them a lot more around, at the moment, they send in their monthly returns to us via email on spreadsheets, but we're trying to onboard them to what's referred to as iConnect, and that's basically they have more control over their data. They upload the reports themselves. That will be a big exercise coming up shortly, and we'll be communicating with them a lot around that and their kind of responsibility to ensure that they're providing kind of accurate and up-to-date data. In regards to the employees, I mentioned before about the member self-service. So we're going to be doing a lot of communication to members around that, for them to have a lot more oversight of their own pensions and to kind of understand a lot more what it offers to them. And also we have the annual benefit statements going out shortly, deadline end of August. That again gives us quite a good opportunity to engage with members around that. And we do kind of find we get a lot of queries around that because they kind of got the statement and they have a lot of questions about their pensions. So it's quite good for us to have that with the members.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Bevan.
So the annual pension statement, I seem to remember we discussed not posting hard copy stuff out some time ago, and I think it was agreed. So am I correct or am I wrong to say that the only people who get that statement are people that we've got an email address for, or have I got that slightly confused?
So last year we did a double approach for active members. They got the statement online via their member self-service portal. For deferred members, we posted them out to them. And I don't think we made a decision on how we're going to do it this year round, but that's how we did it last year. So they didn't need an email address to get it online. It was just added to their online portal account.
Yeah, but that is a great point actually for people who have accessibility needs when it comes to technology. I think is a good point to raise. Yeah, so that's something we should look into. Is there any other comments on this? No? Okay, we'll move to item 13 then. Tim, you're presenting again.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to get my notes up. So item 13 is the forward plan. Again, the purpose of this item is to invite members to identify and agree any priorities of work over the foreseeable future, over the upcoming months. So what we've included ever since the end of the actuarial evaluation, which is a plan on the investment strategy review work. So as members will note, the first priority was for us to assess our income requirements, which we have undertaken. We did an investment working group session, particularly on the investment side of things. And then before this meeting, there was training provided on what the cash flow forecast could look like under various scenarios. So there will be an item following this one, which will be for members to decide. But essentially, that's sort of following that strategy that we agreed previously. I think going forward, there will need to be maybe perhaps a bit more of a discussion around what areas of the investment strategy to prioritize. And again, I would invite member comments on that if there are any. What we've sort of articulated in section 6.6 is that the next stage will be setting those investment objectives, particularly in light of the required return from the actuarial evaluation, but also looking at the responsible investment criteria, which I know is a key focus for the fund, making sure that we have that checklist, that we ensure that all the funds that we invest with are complying with. Following that, then we'll do a wide-scale review of the investment strategy statement, which again may incorporate some of the comments we had earlier with regards to any changes to legislation. But that again will be work that's expected to be happening later on in the winter and going on into the new year. So in Appendix 1 to this paper, I believe Appendix 1 is the high-level forward plan in terms of the item we plan to bring to the meeting. Of course, when we have our discussions on investment strategy, there might be items added there. But again, if there's anything that we've not included or anything that members disagree with, we'd invite those comments at this stage.
Do we have any comments? And just to know, the recommendations are to know the progress made in section 6, but also to identify additional matters and training requirements for inclusion within the Pensions Committee and Board's forward plan. So is there any comments or any training requirements or additional matters that we identify here? Councillor Hymas, and then Councillor Bevan.
Will we be having some further strategy discussions outside this formal meeting, as we did a couple of weeks ago?
Yes, we have plans to do that. Obviously, I welcome feedback from members on how useful they found those sessions. But particularly given that we are going into the summer months, it might be not as easy to get everybody together. But if there is interest in holding another session in August, I'll be happy to make myself and the team available.
Sorry, go on, follow up, Councillor Hymas.
Yeah, I mean, not in August, but maybe early in September before our next meeting, where we discuss the strategy. It might be good to have another, because we have talked a bit about doing some deep dives into a couple of areas. It would be good to work out how we do that and what's the time frame for that.
Yes, yeah, happy to take that forward. I think the September meeting is relatively early, though. I think it's like the first week.
It's 5th, yeah.
So we might do another one in October before the November meeting. I think there's still quite a comprehensive agenda for September. But again, we're happy to sort of take that offline and write to members and see what the availability is like. But conscious that it's just summer months, everyone is taking holidays, so we might have to just defer until October or late September.
Councillor Bevan.
This is quite small print, so forgive me, but we've got the LGA training dates in here, haven't we, which we put in some time ago. So I think we need to remind people, perhaps before the date it's here, you need to get those date books, because if we spend money on training, I'd rather we spent it with the LGA rather than the external organisation. And I think for a lot of members it would be quite good for them to go if they could.
Yeah, so yeah, happy to take that away as an action and write to all members advising them of the new dates. I think previously I had sent the dates, but also just request whether they would like to attend and which dates they would like to attend. And then yeah, we're happy to book that on their behalf. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you say. I think that training is really good, even for members who've been on the committee for a while. I think it's a nice refresher, and for those who've not been for a while, it's a very good training that we'll highly recommend.
And is there any other comments regarding this? Nope. Okay, I will move to item 14. So there's a lot of exempt items that relate to item 14. So I'll allow you to present the item, but I think for our discussion and for recommendations 3 and 4, we'll probably have to take that within the exempt section of this meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's a clear steer. So what I will do is just reference what the item we'll be discussing is about. But essentially, it is a review of the pension fund's cash flow requirement. So essentially, for the pension fund, there's the main sort of priority or the core business of the pension fund is to meet its members' benefits and pay them on time. And each month we get the active employers who are active employees and employers who are currently participating in the fund. They contribute to something that's called contributions. And at the same time, for those people who've already worked in the fund and have now retired, there's also benefits that we pay on a monthly basis. From time to time, there can be imbalances between the two. So in a case where there is more benefits you're paying out than contributions getting in, that's something we refer to as cash negative, which is a position that the fund currently finds itself in. However, there can be different levels of that cash negativity, which might require the focus of the pension fund to review its cash flow strategy to make sure that it is fit for purpose. So essentially, the papers that we've brought forward for the Pensions Committee and Board are specifically for that purpose, to discuss what the cash flow requirement looks like, and also to look at the options of making any changes to the investment strategy to ensure that we have a good cash strategy in place for the pension scheme. So those are the only remarks I'd like to point to, Chair, but happy to have a further discussion during the exempt part of the meeting.
Thank you, Tim. Moving on to item 15, I don't believe there are any new items of urgent business. So we'll move on to item 16, and the next meeting will be on the 5th of September, and that concludes our public portion of the meeting. Whilst we are going into our exempt section, it is 8:10, so we'll start again at 8:15 and give everyone a... Oh, apologies. Yeah. We will now consider items 18 to 21, which contain exempt information. We'll be moving to exclude the press and public from the remainder of the meeting to consider this exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Is the exclusion of the public and press, the press and the public for these items agreed by members? If anyone has any comments or objections to this, please speak now. Otherwise, I will take this as agreed.
Agreed.
This has been agreed. Thank you. This marks the end of the public section of the meeting. We will pause until while the recording of the meeting stops. We will restart the exempt part of this meeting in a few minutes. Cool, thank you. So yeah, I expect to start at 8:15 if you guys would like a comfort break. Thank you.
Only got 4 minutes.